This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, you're encouraged to like and share them on Facebook. And subscribe while you're at it, too, by clicking that big red button, WPSL TV, on Facebook. Because it's time right now for Joanne's World of Nutrition, brought to you by Nutrition World in downtown Fort Pierce, across from City Hall in the historic Arcade Building. And now, your host, Joanne Seeger.
Hello, everybody. Happy Thursday. What an awesome morning here in the Treasure Coast. It's a few degrees cooler. As I was driving to work today, I see everyone out on their bikes. You would think it was 70 degrees around here because everyone's celebrating it not being in the 90s anymore.
Well, the porch was wonderful this morning.
Oh yeah, it's amazing how 5 degrees can make life so much nicer in the mornings. Yeah, the dogs loved it. Well, I am so excited about today's show, and usually if I'm this excited, I do bypass the breathing exercise, because as crucial as it is to breathe and do the exercise with me every Thursday morning, this guest, I want him to have every last minute that he can have on the show. So for any newbies, welcome to the show. I am so grateful for you spending time with us this morning. And for my regulars, I expect you to do the breathing the whole show through. So nice deep breaths in and hold and exhale through your nose. Get centered and focused to learn about all this incredible information that's on our way. All right, so our guest, so one of my favorite supplement lines that I sell at my store is Dr. Mercola's supplement line. I have followed him for a long time on social media. He is an amazing man. So much integrity. He really brings to light on social media so many subjects that are difficult to talk about. It's amazing what he has done for our industry, and just bridging the two worlds of medicine and supplements together. So he has an amazing person on his education team, and we are blessed to listen to one of them today on my show. So without further ado, on the line with us from California, so it's early for him, is Glenn Depke. Good morning, Glenn.
Good morning, Joanne. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, it's early, but this is usual for me, so not a big deal.
Right, and you're Southern California, so you always have beautiful weather there, right?
Typically, yes. And I do agree. It is always nice when the mornings start to turn a little chillier, and my dogs love that as well.
I know, it's amazing. I mean, in Florida, we don't get snow, but at least they get that little sniff of, coolness in the air and go a little crazy. Well, I love fellow dog lovers, too. So, Glenn, I am so excited to have you on my show, and I have to admit, I snooped a little bit on YouTube to hear some of your presentations, and I'm really, really excited to have you on the show. And I think you have so much knowledge in so many areas, but if you could, help our audience understand who you are, maybe just give yourself a couple-minute introduction on where you began and what you're at now.
Sure, and I think the personal aspect probably helps people the most, because I'm 55 years old right now, but when I was 17, I had my first what's known as a grand mal seizure. And when that happened, of course, I went to the doctor, and the doctor had put me through the whole battery of conventional testing, and the end result of that was, well, there's nothing wrong. There's no reason why you had the seizure. Perhaps it was just exhaustion or some random situation, and this will likely never happen again. So just go on with your life. So I did. I just went on with my life. I didn't make any changes to what I did in my life. And about 4 or 6 months later, I had a second seizure. And this time I was around a group of people who, they decided to call the fire department, of course. And I woke up in an ambulance, was taken to a hospital. I went through this whole entire same exact battery of tests with the same result. There's no reason why you have the seizure, but now you've had two. So now we're going to give it a name. Now you're an epileptic, and here, take this pill. with the idea that the reason why I had seizures was a lack of prescription called Dilantin. And that began my journey of really understanding that in this world, in this body that we live in, it's about getting to the core of what's triggering our problems. And that led into my own self-discovery, and even really, and what most people don't know is even me working with Dr. Mercola as a patient years ago. And to make a long story short, I was able to eventually figure out all the triggers as to why I had seizures and overcome the seizure disorder. And to this day, I don't have seizures. I don't take medications for seizures, and I'm never worried about having a seizure again the rest of my life because I got to the bottom of what caused it. And so that really drives my passion and compassion to really help people achieve those same levels within their health.
And you actually got a degree as a traditional naturopath, correct?
That is correct.
Yep. And can you tell our listeners what that is?
Well, there's a difference between a traditional naturopath and a naturopathic medical doctor, whereas I don't have training in prescriptions or minor surgery. And when I'm working with clients in my practice, or even years ago when I was a part of Dr. Mercola's team in the Chicago area, it was really just about using non-invasive, natural, holistic methods to help that person find balance. It's not about diagnosing and curing. It's just about recognizing where there's imbalances and help them achieve that balance naturally. Yeah. So it's a very fun field in life, and it's been a joy for the last, at this time, almost 20 years.
I know I could tell on your YouTube videos how much passion and joy you feel about the subjects, and I can totally relate to that. And one thing I love, that's something we definitely agree on, and of course Dr. Mercola as well, is that there is no condition that comes from, not having that prescription, like you said, it's not because, you're withdrawing because it's not in your system. So I love that. And you yourself, as far as now, a lot of my listeners that, of course, might be struggling with themselves or someone in their family with epilepsy now might have the question, well, how did you do it? Do you think we'll have time maybe at the end of the show to cover that?
Sure.
All right,
yeah,
great.
Let's do it.
All right, because I'm sure, because I know my nephew struggles with that, and my sister-in-law is trying to be all holistic with him. And it's a struggle against, the doctors who kind of back in the corner for the drugs, so it's a little tricky. All right.
Exactly.
So, Glenn, the biggest question I had on last week's show, which I thought, let's hold off, until you can talk about it, was one of my listeners called in and said that he wanted to try the keto diet, but he was so confused because of the information out there and where to start. And from what I understand, you do have a lot of information about the keto diet and how to explain it.
Yes, exactly. And it's even with, what's interesting with keto, too, is, as you just started with, there's a lot of misinformation. And I can give you a little story that happened with me, several months ago. I jumped in my wife's SUV to take it for a ride somewhere, and just, when it turned on, a radio station came on, and I was going to change it to listen to some education as I was driving, but the next words out of the interviewer's mouth caught my attention, and he said, well, we're now going to interview the leading expert on the ketogenic diet in all of LA County coming up next. So it caught my eye, and I was thinking, well, maybe I can get a little tidbit out of here. So I hung on to listen. And it was so interesting because this was a conventional doctor who, again, was coined as the leading keto expert in LA. And they started talking to them about the use of keto for weight loss, and finally came to a question of the interviewer asked this doctor, well, can the keto diet be used long-term? And the doctor said, well, absolutely not, because long-term it would be dangerous, because at the beginning, the keto diet would help you lose weight, and that's what you use it for, very short term. But after that, any diet that tells you to eat a pound of bacon and 4 pieces of toast would be a long-term disaster for you.
Oh, my gosh. I would have
right?
died.
And I was just cringing because that's not the keto diet. Yet this is a man who's being positioned as an expert.
Oh, my gosh.
And I think that's one of the problems now.
I would have been screaming in my car. I would.
I know, exactly. And and the reality though is, and there's so many misconceptions. There's a misconception that it's an extreme diet with this, extreme high amount of fat, and there could be dangers in that. And it's really not even that, because and the keto diet, anybody who's been teaching really sound nutritional habits for the last 2 or 3 decades has been doing a version of the keto diet anyway. It's just that we didn't call it keto then. We didn't necessarily all have the information about the production of ketones, those little fat droplets in the liver that are used as energy in the body. And there's different information that we didn't have years ago, like understanding that when we eat more protein than the body can use in a day, it converts into carbs. So we have a little more education, but it's not much different than what really solid nutritionists have been teaching for a number of decades. And it's not radical, even from the standpoint of when people bring up, I don't think it's healthy to eat all that fat. But what most people aren't thinking about is when somebody says you should eat, about 70 to 85% of your calories of fat, I think a lot of people have this misconception that means you want to eat 70 to 85% of all your food is fat, but that's not the case. And calories in fat fat is just so much more caloric dense than, let's say, vegetables. Because as an example, talking about Florida, a typical Florida avocado has 364 calories in it, and a cup of chopped broccoli has only 31 calories. So we can see how easy it is to get this amount of percent of calories of fat without eating these huge amounts of fat all the time.
That's a great point, Glenn, because I know a lot of people imagine their plate just being full of fat, not understanding the concentration, like you said, of the calories. So that was a great example. Love it.
And from here, with keto too, which is so interesting, is that it's when you break it down into basics. You're eating, without getting into exact numbers, for the basic level, typically people would be eating a small amount, like low to moderate amounts of protein, because again, it's not like when we think of years ago with the Atkins diet, where you eat all the protein and fat you want, because we now do understand that when you eat, as mentioned earlier, if you eat more protein than your body needs, it converts it into carbs. So it's not about over-consuming protein, which can also be a strain on the kidneys and lead to some other underlying triggers within poor health anyway to overconsume protein. So you're getting what's right for the body. You're eating, and this is another area where there's confusion is what the net carbs that's always talked about. To even define that first for people is if you're, when you're trying to figure out net carbs for like a keto newbie, you take the total carbs that are like if you have broccoli will have a certain amount of carbohydrates, but then you subtract the carbs that come from fiber, which gives you the net carbs. So without giving you exact numbers, as an example of that, if it had 15 carbs, but 10 of them were from fiber, well, the net carbs are only 5. And so you can still eat plenty of vegetables. As an example, Joanne, I've eaten this way for 20 years. And even from the seizure world, back when the keto diet was first even just really, I don't want to say discovered, but for lack of a better word, discovered and introduced, it was really introduced for children with seizures, to really help to overcome epilepsy and seizure disorders. And it's just a great sound way of eating on a consistent basis, and something we'll get into a little bit later with it, as long as you're changing things up a little bit as you go on with keto. That's another key point as well.
Okay, that sounds excellent. And I know everyone's like, ooh, okay, the tie-in to keto and weight loss. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, and everyone wants to know, well, how much weight can we lose? How long should we be on the keto? And like you mentioned, that gentleman on the radio who was completely wrong, you can be on keto long term, forever. But Definitely, I know with the good fats, one of my favorites that Dr. Mercola makes, and I use every single day, is the MCT oil. Do you use the MCT oil in your everyday life?
I do. I prefer the ketone energy, which is the caprylic 8 MCT. I personally,
That's what I
you
use.
really can't go wrong with either the organic MCT or the ketone energy. And that's just a part of my, that's my for me personally, that's my morning. I don't eat a normal, meal, that most people would. I generally, in the mid-morning, like early to mid-morning, I'll have a cup of organic, half caffeinated coffee, and in that, I'll put a generous amount of organic butter and a tablespoon of the ketone energy, caprylic 8 MCT, and blend that up, and just really, that's a fantastic way for me personally to start my day. And when I do that, I typically don't have my first, conventional meal until probably 11 a.m. or sometimes noon. Yet I don't have there's no negative implications. It's not like I'm suffering with low energy or poor mental clarity or emotional imbalance. I mean, I stay really solid by eating in that way, which is typical for people following a keto diet.
Well, I definitely start my day the same exact way, and I absolutely love it. I find that I am so focused and so energized and feel my best, when I start the day with that. And, sometimes I'll leave out the butter. My husband's a vegan, so we kind of, work around the butter issue. But but just having the oil, and I like you use Mercola's ketone energy, but I do have the MCT oil as well. Can you help our listeners understand the difference between the lauric acid, the caprylic acid, and the C8, C10, and what that really means to the user?
Yeah, and the easiest way for me to get into that is just really the focus on the outstanding benefits of the caprylic 8. When we're talking about the different MCTs and with different products out there, it's so different as well. There's so many oils on the market they're marketed and promoted as MCT, but they might have half of the oil is just a straight coconut oil, and then the other half is a mixture of MCT oils. Or you'll have a lot of the blends who really don't have much of the caprylic 8, and to me that's where the real jewel is, because because when I'm putting something into my body, I'm always thinking about what are the benefits of it, and then of course I like things to taste good as well. And the caprylic 8, that part of the MCT, different from the 10 and the 12, whereas the 10 and the caprylic 10s and 12 still have benefits, but the 8 has been shown to be far more productive in helping to create these ketones in the liver, which is another thing where there's also a lot of confusion in the keto diet, because it's almost like people think these ketones are these magical things that come from who knows where, but it's very simple to understand. I mean, ketones are just little fat droplets that are produced in the liver when your body doesn't have the carbs to break down for energy, and so instead, if you don't have fat to break down, your liver is also producing these little ketones. And the advantage of that, too, because when you can use the caprylic 8, the ketone energy, and have these ketones for energy, or you're burning down and breaking fat for fuel, which are both going to be an advantage, it's not just about the ketones. It's not just about burning fat for fuel. The other thing that is a major advantage to this with the caprylic 8, the ketones and fat for fuel, is that fat, when you burn fat as compared to carbs, number one, you enjoy about 6 or 7 times more energy burning fat than you do carbs, and who doesn't want more energy nowadays? And the other factor of the use of the caprylic 8 into the ketones and the fat for fuel is that it's also much cleaner energy, because what most people don't know is when we burn carbs for fuel, there's far more free radical activity and oxidative stress that occurs as compared to when you're using ketones or burning fat for fuel. So that caprylic 8 goes a long way in not only supplying and assisting with the production of the ketones in the liver, but the caprylic 8 also moves much easier into the brain to support brain health as well, which is another significant advantage.
And I think, too, I mean, a lot of our listeners are concerned about the gut health and are starting to understand the gut and brain connection. And as well as I find that using that combination like you every morning, it gets things going. And I feel like, if there's yeast or candida, there's a lot of studies, talking about the caprylic C8 and killing the yeast and the biofilm around it. And I love thinking of that, like I'm drinking my coffee in the morning and all those little bugs are dying as but it feels good. Like I feel like my stomach is saying thank you. And when I go to the bathroom, it just, when I don't have that combination in the morning, if I go away and don't prepare myself, it feels different in my body. I don't feel as well.
Well, it's the same thing with me. I mean, I travel a lot for Dr. Mercola with education, and every once in a while, because I try to bring just a small container of my caprylic 8, the ketone energy, and every once in a while I'll forget it, and going out, and there's such a difference of having a really good organic half calf in your home with organic butter and the ketone energy and blended as compared to being out and getting what typically isn't organic coffee and using like a heavy cream instead. And it's not that. Yeah. Not that there's still not some level of enjoyment with it, but it's from a performance perspective with the body, it's just not the same.
It's not. So, if anybody has not tried this before, it's sold by Dr. Mercola at most health food stores in glass bottles. It is absolutely wonderful, affordable, super great for your health, and I always say carbs. Most of us know, like when we start our mornings with these big carby breakfasts, we're getting brain fog, we're tired. It starts this endless vicious cycle of craving more carbs and feeling like I need more sugar, I need more caffeine, and it's just this endless nightmare. And Glenn, like I'm in my menopausal years, and I got to tell you that it's like there's so many great studies, like you mentioned, for your epilepsy from, well, I don't want to say yours, I won't label you, but from the past, and my hormone situation as well. It all gets benefited by, whether you call yourself on a keto diet or not, staying away from all this refined carbs. But the next question is, what about, there are people, namely me, that struggle staying on the keto program. The carb addiction gets the best of us. Is there a ratio? Like a lot of my customers ask me, well, Joanne, I can stick with it during the week, but come the weekend with my family, that bagel is too tempting, or that bowl of pasta. Like, is there a huge detriment to doing part-time keto?
Well, here's the one way to explain it, and not that I would say that the bagel or the plate of pasta is the way to go, but even with Dr. Mercola's two books that are out, the Fat for Fuel, which to me is by far the best book anybody will ever read on keto that's out there. And I've read countless amounts of books on keto through the years, and nothing compares to that. But the advancement, though, is with Dr. Mercola's next book, with the keto fast. And because this is the big thing, and this is the major understanding in keto that is really the newest understanding. Because keto itself, when you're just always restricting the amount of carbs, in the end, that can create some digestive unrest. Because when because a lot of people, Dr. Mercola teaches us in Fat for Fuel to start with 50 net carbs or less. And we are also a culture of less is more, or so we always want to do more of something. So if we think that 50 net carbs or less is good, well, let's go to 40 or less, or let's go to 30 or less, or 20 or less, or 10 or less. There are some people who just eliminate the carbs altogether. And the problem with that is the more restricted we get on net carbs, generally the less the amount of carbohydrate-based foods we're going to consume. And we get just really into this pattern of just eating these really low net carb vegetables on a consistent basis. And long term, that can start to disrupt the microbiome because we're not getting these digestive resistant starches in anymore because they're typically, I'm doing air quotes here, typically they're too net carb heavy for people doing keto. So in Dr. Mercola's Keto Fast book, he explains that once you've reached this state of ketosis where your body can consistently produce between like 0.5 and 3 ketones, or even if you're not measuring ketones, if you reach the point when you're doing keto that you recognize that, wow, I'm consistently losing weight, my energy is better, I'm just overall feeling better, I don't crave carbs anymore, I'm eating less than I have in the past, and I'm still getting all these benefits. When people start to feel that with consistency, at least over the first month, and when you're confident you've reached the state where your liver is producing these ketones, well, then you switch into the keto fast aspect. And what that means is that if you took 7 days out of the week, 4 of those days you would follow the keto diet as you've been, but then 2 of the 7 days you would actually do what's called a keto feasting days, and then 1 day you would do a keto fasting day. See, and in the keto feasting days, you're increasing your net carbs. So let's just say you're somebody like myself. I try to keep my net carbs under that 30 net carbs per day or less, which still allows me plenty of chances to eat more than enough vegetables through the day. But then 2 days a week, I go up to about somewhere between 100 and 150 carbs, and I'll eat things like basmati rice or papaya or maybe even sometimes occasionally some sourdough bread if I'm really, jonesing for that taste and flavor. So there is actually an advantage to that once you've reached the state of consistent ketosis. And just always remembering that those digestive resistant starches that we would eat actually help the microbiome.
Okay, well, I'm going for that. I'm going to stick. So you said 2 days feasting and 1 day fasting?
Yes.
Okay.
And the fasting day, you're really focusing on eating just one meal, if possible, or it could be 2 meals within a 6-hour period. But you're keeping those meals generally somewhere between like 300 to 600 calories.
Okay.
So it's a lower calorie day, and just a restriction of food for that fasting day, which it's almost like, the example that I give with that, and that's even in Dr. Mercola's book, is, when you're building a muscle and lifting weights, you're actually, putting stress on the soft tissue to where there's breaks in the fiber, and then you let it recover. And that's kind of the same thing you're doing with the body, is when you do the fasting day and then you follow with a feasting day, you're just getting into that recovery. So it's like just stimulating, what I like to say is just stimulating optimal health, which is such an advantage for everybody.
That is so well put, Glenn. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I definitely want to talk about ubiquinol. Some of my listeners are probably like, ubiquinol, but definitely stay tuned,
love it.
everyone.
One of my favorite supplements.
I know, so stay tuned, and we'll be right back, everybody.
Guiding the Treasure Coast in health, one person at a time. That's their motto at Joanne's Nutrition World, Suite 121, in the historic Arcade Building on US 1, downtown Fort Pierce. Joanne brings more than 25 years of experience in the natural health industry, right here to you. Take advantage of this free personal guide to wellness and good health. Meet with Joanne herself and get started. Nutrition World always provides you with the hottest new product lines, natural and homeopathic remedies, herbals, and best of all, expert advice from the people who care. Call Joanne at 464-3598, 464-3598, and learn the correlation between diet and great health. Stop in today. The expert guidance to health is always free at Nutrition World. Nutrition World, Suite 121 in the Arcade Building, US 1, downtown Fort Pierce.
Hey, it's Dr. Ravi at Tradition Family Chiropractic. We are dedicated to serving you and your family with integrity, compassion, and innovative care through the most advanced chiropractic care ever in chiropractic history, encouraging your health and your family's health to its maximum potential on a regular basis. Call us today at 772-345-0060 or schedule online at traditionhealth.com for your free consultation.
This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
We now return to Nutrition World with Joanne Seeger.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for spending some time with me this morning. We have a very special guest this morning, and Glenn works with Dr. Mercola's Supplement Company, and he is an educator, a traditional naturopath. Oh, I stumbled on that word for a second.
Yeah.
And we are talking about the keto diet, and you are definitely clarifying things for our listeners, and hopefully that good message will get spread, because the keto definitely has an important place in this world if used properly. And I know you just gave my listeners a couple things to look forward to. So Dr. Mercola's new book, Keto Fasting, did you say it was called?
Yes, it's called the Keto Fast, and I would even say that for everybody who, when you're starting with keto, the book Fat for Fuel is the essential starting point. So I would actually start there, get on your consistent keto diet, and then move into the keto fast.
Okay, sounds good. And I know the Fat for Fuel is not only a very informative book, but a beautiful book to keep in your library. It's definitely worth getting the hard copy versus just doing, the audio. All right, so
Exactly.
Because I've got 20 minutes left, and you and I definitely share the passion for this next supplement, which I feel is extremely overlooked. So ubiquinol, please tell everyone about the magic of it.
Yeah. Can't say enough about this. I actually take I take 300 milligrams every day, and I'll take minimally that for the rest of my life, to be very candid. And it's the big thing with ubiquinol. It's all tied into mitochondria. And the most basic way for me to explain that is the mitochondria is a little engine that drives every cell in the body. What a lot of people don't recognize is that it's really responsible. The mitochondria is responsible for approximately 96% of the body's energy. Yeah, and I mentioned before, like, who doesn't want more energy nowadays, right? And it's not just that. It's also, the mitochondria is also essential for those high energy needs in the body. So areas like your kidneys or your liver or your heart, and also your brain, which is, for me, the big reason why I take ubiquinol every day. While I still enjoy all the other benefits of the energy, my kidneys, my liver, my heart, but because of my history with epilepsy and a very strong history of neurodegeneration in my family, I want to take care of my brain all the time. So supporting that with the ubiquinol goes such a long way. And that's the other key too, is that most people really need ubiquinol, because a lot of times when, if we're just doing some internet searches on mitochondria, we often just come up with the words of CoQ10, the CoQ10,
Yep.
which does have an advantage, except the CoQ10 needs to be converted into ubiquinol. And most people that either have poor digestion, or once we start to reach that age of about, I always like this, I know Dr. Mercola always says 35, but I always say about 30 to 35, we start to lose that intrinsic factor to convert the CoQ10 into ubiquinol. So we take CoQ10 and really don't get the advantage for the mitochondria. So the ubiquinol plays a very big role there.
Right, and I know some doctors still are suggesting the CoQ10, and when customers come in, they get a little confused why I'm showing them ubiquinol. But it's amazing, though, because for the longest time, we only suggested the CoQ10 or the ubiquinol when they were taking a statin. It's like, okay, if you're on
Right.
any prescriptions, that are, interfering with the CoQ10, take this. But there's so many other uses for it. It's incredible. So it's
Well, and the other thing too is, even in my office, in my practice, I don't even. It's not that you can't still use a CoQ10. It's still great for people who are younger. I know Dr. Mercola has a liposomal form of CoQ10, which is fantastic and highly absorbable. And and outside of this, everything we're talking about, the mitochondria, it's also a very potent antioxidant. And for people who are younger with good digestion, they've got the intrinsic factor to make that conversion. But for the rest of us, we don't. And there's one other aspect, though, too, in my clinic, even though, and I use other supplement lines other than just Dr. Mercola's, but Dr. Mercola's is the only ubiquinol I will ever use. And it's all because of the capsule.
oh,
Whereas
tell us about that.
every other ubiquinol I've ever seen on the market is in a gel cap. And what most people don't realize is that when you look at a gel cap underneath in a microscope, they have little cracks in the gel cap. And when there's cracks in the gel cap, that allows oxygen to get through the gel cap into the contents of what's internally within that gel cap. And the problem with that, with ubiquinol, is that when ubiquinol is exposed to oxygen, so as soon as somebody cracks the seal on that airtight bottle and they allow the oxygen in there, over time, the oxygen that's getting into the bottle gets through the cracks, comes in contact with the ubiquinol. And here's the kicker with this, Joanne, that most people don't know, is that when the ubiquinol is exposed to oxygen, it converts back into CoQ10.
Oh, I didn't even know that. All right, that's
So,
crazy. Okay.
Yeah. So that's one of the big things. Whereas Dr. Mercola's ubiquinol is in a Lee cap, which is when you look at a Lee cap underneath a microscope, it doesn't have cracks. It's hermetically sealed, and it even contains a little nitrogen bubble to, it's a little extra insurance on maintaining the overall integrity and freshness of what's inside. And I want to make sure that when I'm taking ubiquinol, I want to make sure it's ubiquinol. Because
good point.
otherwise, because for me at 55, I probably don't have the intrinsic factor to optimally convert my CoQ10 into ubiquinol. So I want to make sure that I'm not only getting what I need, but it's staying what I need.
Yeah,
That's such a key point.
It's not what you take, it's what you absorb, right?
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
now, and you mentioned you're doing 300 milligrams of ubiquinol.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a general suggestion that when you work with people that, a guide? I get sometimes, old school, I've been doing this about 30 years, we always went by weight. It was like, but not really health. It was just weight. Is that still the same reasoning, or has it changed?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of supplements are, I think in the supplement world in general, a lot of supplements are based on a 150-pound person. So generally speaking, if they're less than 150, you might dose a little bit lower. If they're more than 150, you might dose a little bit higher. Yeah, and for me, the way I look at ubiquinol, because when I think about this from a client perspective, I'm just helping that client support this natural utilization of mitochondria. If somebody's already healthy and they're past 30 or 35, somewhere in there, taking 100 milligrams of ubiquinol when you're already in really good health is just a good, it's a good practice to be in, because the ubiquinol plays such a huge role as tied into the mitochondria. And I would also say that when people are, like with me, with a strong family history of neurodegeneration, because I had a grandmother and a mother who both died with severe dementia, and an older brother who died with ALS. And so with that strong family history of neurodegeneration, I do everything I can to always support my brain. So to me, when you're using ubiquinol in a deeper supportive role, whether it be tied into brain health or helping support brain health, or helping support cardiovascular health, or helping support your liver or kidneys, or just energy in the body. I've always found in doing my research is that it's typically about 300 milligrams daily is a good dose for achieving that level of support when you know you're either dealing with a problem or dealing with a history of a problem.
And, I've been taking it so long. Do you notice with new clients, do they feel the energy when they first begin? I know that, like I said, I feel really good in the mornings. My afternoons I got to work on, but do you find that when you work with people, they get a little energy increase right away, or?
Yeah, most do within a few weeks. They'll have a noticeable shift, which is always an advantage for them. And I had something similar to that when I don't know if you carry this in your store, but when I not too long ago started adding in the berberine and micro PQQ,
Yes, I do
personally
sell it.
noticed a
Yes.
big shift with that as well.
Okay, what time of day do you take that one?
I take it in the morning with that keto coffee that I take.
Okay, all right. So PQQ is a little new to the store, but I do have it, and I haven't got too much follow up on customers that have bought it on their experience with it. But it's not in my regimen yet. But I think I might be adding it after today.
Yeah. It was when I started doing the research on it. It was fascinating as far as the berberine cleaning out the mitochondria and the PQQ enhancing the bioactivity of it. And I definitely noticed a change taking it. I'm always excited to talk about that.
I just got this analogy of like an oil change in a car, like you clean out the mitochondria and you put new fuel in, it's like
Right. No,
make the
that's
body
a great
run
analogy
more
as well.
efficiently. Yeah, I do that all day long to, help people understand the things that we think about, right? But and I know one of another favorite of yours is D3 and K and vitamin K.
Yes.
Can we touch on that? And I still think there's so much confusion. Why the K with the D3? A lot of times the store shelves are full of both separate and then together, and people are still not understanding why together.
Yes, and it's all about absorption. It's just, as you had mentioned, it's not what you take, it's what you absorb, right?
Definitely.
And then with the D, when you just take D alone, now if you take liposomal vitamin D, that's fine, to do that. But there's a lot of people are taking vitamin D are not taking a liposomal form, and they're just taking a straight D, and then they're wondering why this isn't changing. Why are the vitamin D levels not really moving much with my blood work? And excuse me. And basically, it's because the K2 plays a very important role in the absorption of the vitamin D as well, and that's one of the key factors there. And it's and I've even had I think of a story with a client from years ago where. We initially, and this was when I was in Dr. Mercola's office, and this was one of Dr. Mercola's patients who had a vitamin D level that was very low. It was about, I don't remember exactly, it was either 9 or 11. And back in that day, we didn't quite have all of the information that we do now, because that was, back in 2004. So it was quite some time ago. In taking just regular vitamin D supplements, she had such a tough time getting her vitamin D level up. And then she started using a combination of D with the K2 as years went on, and research had continued and advanced. And all of a sudden, you were seeing this big change in what was going on with her vitamin D levels in the blood. And it's also important to recognize that with the K2, is that I know the K2 that Dr. Mercola uses actually comes from chickpeas. Rather than a lot of the K2 would be soy-based, and most people with a health focus are trying to stay away from soy at any cost, unless, of course, it's organic and certified GMO-free, and if you don't have a sensitivity to soy as well.
Yes, that's a great point. We're all trying to stay away from soy these days. So, Glenn, in case you're not aware of it, I have a live call-in show, and we do have a caller. Are you okay with taking a call?
Excellent.
Awesome. All right. Well, good morning, Jerry. How are you today? Jerry, you there, honey?
Jerry, you're on the air.
Okay. We might have lost Jerry. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
He might have. I think he's on another line. Is this Jerry here on this line? Let's try it.
Okay.
Waiting.
Are you there,
There,
Jerry?
there's
Joanne.
Jerry.
Jerry.
Good morning, Jerry. Sorry about the
Good morning, Joanne.
confusion.
Thank you for taking my call. And just
Of course.
my dad was 92 years old, and he just passed in February.
I'm so
And he
sorry.
had advanced Alzheimer's. And I was wondering, when they use the term synapse, are they talking about the distance between the neurons and the encephalo, the brain? Is that what they're talking about when they use that word synapse? I'd like to listen off air, if that'd be okay.
Sounds great. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much, Jerry. All right. Well, Glenn, you're so taking this one. He just went right over my head with that question.
I think Jerry might think
Yeah,
that you're a
that
doctor.
is,
Sound
that
like a
is
doctor.
typically what they're referring to, and my condolences out to Jerry and his family. You know, my father is going to be turning 92 this December, and so yeah, I can understand that. But basically, the synapse in the nervous system, it's think of it as a structure that permits the neuron or the nerve cell to pass an electrical or chemical signal from one neuron to the target effector cell. So it's a communication system in the neurological system, and with that, that's why it's so important to support a healthy brain. That's why it's important to support with ubiquinol. That's why it's important to support, and this is another area where the ketone 8, the ketone energy, caprylic 8, plays a big role, because it's fantastic in actually moving into the brain. And even personally, I every day take Dr. Mercola's keto krill, because it not only has the omega-3s that the brain needs, and especially that DHA of the omega-3, but it's also got the caprylic 8 and a couple other nootropics that all support, optimal brain health, and even doing things like getting more blood to the brain, which is why I take personally the fermented beets with red spinach, because that helps increase the body's natural production of nitric oxide, and when we increase nitric oxide, we can increase blood flow to the brain, which is another key component. So there's so many things that we can all do. Just from my own personal opinion, from a brain health perspective, I feel that almost 100% of neurodegenerative issues are preventable. Yet
I
just, as
definitely
a
agree.
culture, we don't take the steps to prevent it. We wait until we have a diagnosis, and once you get the diagnosis, often it's too late to turn it around. It can still be. I've seen people have success with that. But it's always a key to prevent. That's why I spend, I take 4 things every day to help maintain and support my brain. And I do that because I know where my family history is. I know where my own history is. So I want to make sure that I take care of that on a daily basis.
Okay, and what 4 things are those?
That's I take the keto krill, 2 per day, the 300 milligrams ubiquinol, which I mentioned. I take 2 of the fermented beets with red spinach, and currently I'm taking 1 of the berberine and micro PQQ.
Okay, all right. So I got half of those going. And what about the ketone energy? How many do you do, like a tablespoon in the morning and then another serving, or how many do you do with that one?
Yeah, I'll do, and sometimes I even do a little bit more than a tablespoon in my morning keto coffee. And I'll typically do 1 more later in the day, again, because of my focus on not just keto, but my focus on brain support, and it's another way of making sure I'm achieving my ratios of fat consumption as well.
All right, and Glenn, my listeners might not understand that you are a wealth of knowledge. I mean, you definitely have extensive knowledge in hormone balancing, adrenal function, gut health, many very difficult subjects to understand. But what I loved what you kept kind of saying in a lot of your messages is how important the thought life is. Your thinking patterns, and a lot of people still are not getting that connection. Do you still feel that way? I noticed some of your videos really push that.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's, as an example, when I talk about fundamentals of health, and I'm talking about things like deep breathing and proper hydration, nutrition, sleep, movement, and sun exposure, I always think of the foundation of all those fundamentals as what's going on with us mentally, emotionally, and energetically. Even my years even in Dr. Mercola's clinic, where I was one of the team of EFT therapists, and recognizing that what's going on in our mind plays such a significant role in what's going on with our health. And for people who are, and I say this facetiously, walking stress balls, right, or dealing with all this emotional suppression of traumas of the past, finding tools to use such as EFT, which I know Dr. Mercola has been a huge proponent of that through the years, and there's so many videos on his website with EFT with Julie Schiffman, who's just a fantastic EFT practitioner. And basically it's a tool to help us perceive stress differently and react to it differently, which then provides the underlying foundation of which to build what I consider the most optimal level of health that we can achieve is tied into that as well. So I'm glad you brought that up, because it's often a missing piece of the puzzle.
Right, and that is so well said. I try to stress it every day, but sometimes it's more difficult to have that conversation with my customers than it is to hand them 10 bottles and charge them $300. It's like, and then I'll say, well, now you got to think positive and find ways to, have a, good spiritual life, and they look at me like I'm cross-eyed. So,
right, exactly.
But
exactly.
it is critical that people know that is the most important component of any healthy lifestyle.
Right, right. Well, that's why I was excited to hear at the beginning when you had mentioned that you typically go through a breathing exercise, because most people don't realize that when you're deep breathing, which is a parasympathetic activity, it's a part of that rest and digest side of the nervous system. Physiologically, you can't be under stress and deep breathe at the same time.
Exactly. And I always say, too, like when I'm feeling down, I look in the mirror with a great big smile, even though it pains me sometimes to do it. And no matter what, I feel better. So it's kind of a quirky thing, but it works. Glenn, I wish we had hours more, but unfortunately, this is the ending music. I hope you have an amazing day, and thank you for spending your morning with us.
It's my pleasure.
All right.
We'll do it again.
Sounds great. Thank you, Glenn. All right, everyone, I hope you enjoyed. If not, Cliff will put it on YouTube and on my Facebook later this week. Have a great week and be back soon.
Archives of Joanne's World of Nutrition can be found on YouTube. Look for WPSL TV. And to make it easy for you, we created a redirect. You type in www.wpsltv.com. It takes you straight to our WPSL TV on YouTube. This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast, where the time right now is 11 o'clock.